Coming up next on Cooking with MFRD, we've got your cure for the winter blues in the form of a Fire Hall Cabbage Stew and cornbread. Hello and welcome to this episode of Cooking with MFRD. I'm your host, Ashley McDonald, and are you looking for something to keep you warm during the winter months? Have we got the soup for you? We've got some Fire Hall Cabbage Stew coming up. You're going to need the following ingredients: 1 pound of ground beef, 1 pound of hot or mild sausage, 1 pound of kielbasa, 1 large head of cabbage, 1 onion diced, 1 bell pepper diced, 3 15-ounce cans of stewed tomatoes, 1 large can of tomato sauce, garlic powder, salt, and pepper to taste. Today we've got Assistant Chief of Medical Services, Kim Lawson, here sharing this Fire Hall Cabbage Stew recipe with us. And Kim, you've got some things already going on the stove here. We've got some meat browning, and I understand we're going to add some peppers and onions to it.
We are. In order to save a little bit of time, I like to go ahead and brown my onions and pepper with my ground beef and the sausage mixture and get that started. It's just kind of a little shortcut. At the same time, I have diced cabbage, and we've got that parboiling.
Awesome. Now explain exactly to our viewers what parboiling is, or what the process does for this.
Well, this is a cabbage-based, very hearty stew. It has a lot of meat to it. It's a great meal for the Fire Hall because it can kind of be turned off and left. And so going ahead like with vegetables, cabbage, I like to go ahead and parboil that. And what that means is you're kind of cooking it at least halfway. That way when you add it to the soup, it cooks a little bit quicker.
So about how long does that process take?
Probably about 15 minutes.
Okay.
So I've got that going now.
Okay, and so we just want to make sure that the peppers and onions are translucent in the meat mixture. How did you develop this recipe, Kim? Or is this something that in your many years at the Fire Hall that you picked up? Or?
Well, in Nashville, where I spent a good part of my career before joining Murfreesboro Fire, we used to have competitions between teams of firefighters, typically different stations. They would actually kind of build a booth. We'd go to the municipal auditorium, and they would use their own recipe. A lot of times, the money was given to charity. Media members would come in and they would judge, and they would pick a winner. It was always a really fun thing. Now, I was not in a competition, but I kind of learned how to cook from a lot of firefighters.
Awesome, awesome. Yes, Kim is our newest member of MFRD. She came to us in May, like she said, from Nashville Metro. She retired after 35 plus years of service, and she's our Assistant Chief of Medical Services, so we're happy that she's here cooking with us today. Okay, is your meat about ready to drain?
It is.
Okay, and while you're doing that,
as you see, my handle is pulled away in case there are children or in case I walk by and catch the pot handle.
That's a great safety tip.
Okay, so I'll go drain this.
Okay, and while Kim's doing that, we've already sliced up, or diced up rather, some kielbasa into bite-sized chunks. I'm going to be adding this to the pot, and then once Kim has drained her meat mixture, she's going to be adding that to the pot with it. Okay, and she's adding the meat mixture.
Now, as you notice, I didn't cook the kielbasa because, or the smoked sausage, whatever you prefer. You can even use turkey if you want to keep it a little leaner. I like the kielbasa flavoring to cook into the soup with the cabbage. So
that's a good idea.
I put that in and then let it cook for some time.
Okay, now we're going to be adding 3 cans of tomatoes.
You know, this is another great recipe for camping. My children grew up with this cabbage stew. You kind of compile it in the morning time, put it in a slow cooker, and by evening time when it's cool fall camping, it is just perfect.
we're gonna add a can of tomato sauce also. Okay, and Kim, I'm gonna stir that up if you wanna drain your cabbage off.
Okay.
And I understand that's one of the last things we're gonna be putting in there. So
Go ahead and
while
season
you're
it.
draining that, I'll
Okay. Get the
stir that
seasonings
up.
ready.
Sure. Okay, we've got sugar, salt, and pepper, and garlic powder. And I'm gonna let Kim season it to taste because I don't know exactly what it's supposed to taste like. It's very festive, very colorful. Now, Kim, how many years would you say you have been making this recipe?
I would say probably 30 years or more.
Wow. So you've perfected it over those 30 years, you think?
I don't know. I've had quite a bit of practice. Ready to put the cabbage in?
Yes. And we'll get ready for the seasonings.
Now, the one thing about cabbage is it has a lot of water content. And this is, again, a low-carb kind of soup. Not low-fat, but you can make it lower fat. And cabbage, once it cooks, it's going to develop its own
give it
broth
another
out of the
stir.
cabbage.
This is already looking and smelling so good.
You need a big pot to start with, but the cabbage will cook down into a reasonable amount. But as you can see, she's using quite a big pot there.
You have to have some muscle action too to be stirring this, I'll just tell you that right now. That's why this is a firefighter stew.
It is such the perfect thing in a fire station because, you know, at a moment's notice, they have to stop what they're doing. It doesn't matter what they're doing, and they need to go on an emergency.
Right.
So typically they can just turn it off and leave it on the stove, and the longer this cooks, the better it gets.
How much salt would you add, Kim? You think just a few sprinkles?
To
or?
taste. Cabbage is kind of bland, so I would add a little bit more. I'm going
Okay.
to say around a teaspoon of salt.
That may be a little more than a teaspoon, but we'll be okay. We'll make it.
And garlic powder, about a teaspoon of that as well. And it's something that my mother taught me, and I don't know if it's true or not, but she always added, when she cooked things with tomatoes and tomato sauce, she'd always add around a tablespoon of sugar. She said that it kind of cut the acid of the sugar. So I still do that to like spaghetti sauce and chili and this type of meal.
That's an interesting tidbit.
So it looks pretty thick,
Yes, it does. Looks
but it will
good.
cook down. I like to cook it a minimum of about 2 hours. And the neat thing about cabbage, it doesn't really get mushy in the tomato base.
It smells so good too. Well, I can't wait to try this. And I know it has to simmer for an hour or two. So do we have some maybe that you've already cooked up
Well,
for us so we can try it?
It just so happens, before we came, to make a pot.
Awesome. Let me get us some bowls.
As you can see, it's cooked down just nicely.
Yes. Hence it being a stew. Oh, it looks so good. Wish you could smell it.
You can see it's nice and meaty and hearty.
There's your spoon.
Thank you.
Okay, so I want to try to get a bite of everything in here, so let's see if I can accomplish that. Very, very good. And the sugar is very subtle. It's very awesome. This would go really good with some cornbread. So coming up next, we've got some easy cornbread. Welcome back. What goes better with Fire Hall Cabbage Stew than cornbread? So today we've got Chef Commander Tim Swann here. He's going to walk us through his easy cornbread recipe. But first you're going to need the following ingredients. 1/4 cup of vegetable oil, 2½ cups of Martha White buttermilk cornmeal mix, 2 cups of whole fat buttermilk, and 1 large egg. Hello, Chef Commander Swann, how are you?
Hello, great.
Good.
Good to be here.
Okay, so I understand this is so easy that I can do it.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, let's go through it.
All right, well, we've already preheated our oven to 500 degrees.
Okay.
And we've already taken our skillet, our cast iron skillet, and have a well-seasoned cast iron skillet. Put a quarter cup of oil in it, and we're going to put that in the oven, and we're going to leave it for about 5 minutes. And then we're going to start mixing up our ingredients. And within a couple of minutes of that skillet getting heated up nicely, we're going to put everything in our bowl and get it stirred up.
Awesome. So we're going to need 2.5 cups of this cornmeal mix. Do they need to be even, or are we okay if they're a little rough?
It can be a little rough.
Okay. I'm sure at the fire hall everything's pretty rough anyway.
Absolutely.
Okay. So how did you develop this easy recipe? Is this something that you've cooked in the fire hall for years, or?
Just several people, including my mother, just taking bits and pieces from each individual. And it's simple. It's the beginning recipe for if you want to make dressing at Thanksgiving time, or you can add different ingredients and make sausage cornbread, or add a little sugar to it, make sweet cornbread, or you can...
or bacon, or cheese, or corn, or jalapenos. Or...
Absolutely. So
now,
2.5 cups of cornmeal, 2 cups of buttermilk.
Okay. Now, you mentioned your mother. Let's talk about your father for a minute. He was the chief of Murfreesboro Fire and Rescue Department back when it was Murfreesboro Fire Department for several years.
Yes, 29.5 years.
Chief Bobby Swann.
Bobby Swann retired in 1988.
And how, did you ever work with him?
No, I started in 1990.
Okay.
So he was retired a couple of years before.
But you've got to hear several interesting stories, I'm sure, about him.
Absolutely.
Can you share any of them with us?
Probably not.
What's he most known for, I guess?
Probably the best thing he's known for is the oven that actually is at the Discovery House, Discovery Center at this time. That was the fire engine that I actually loved. He made sure he would tell the firefighters to make sure it was clean every morning. He actually, we'll tell you one story about it. He used to take pieces of paper and go and sit it on the oven just to see and make sure they went out and cleaned it that morning and wiped it off. And if he went out there during the day and that piece of paper was still there, then
he knew they didn't touch it.
They knew, yeah, absolutely. Then he'd be calling everybody out there to find out why it didn't get cleaned up that morning.
That's funny. So you're carrying on his legacy by working at our fire department. Yes. Well, that's interesting, very interesting. Okay, is this about where you normally have it mixed?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Next, what we're going to do, we're going to take our skillet out.
Okay.
And we're going to be careful. We're going to take the oil that's in the skillet and pour it back into our batter. And then we're going to mix it up again. Then we're going to pour our batter back into our skillet.
Okay. Sounds easy enough. Hear it sizzle.
Absolutely. Have you a couple of towels ready so you can wipe the bottom of your skillet off.
Okay, and
what this does, it helps to sit there and make a nice brown crust on the bottom of your cornbread.
Which is the best part.
Yeah, and it actually helps to keep it from sticking in your skillet also by having it that hot.
It's a good little piece of information there, Shift Commander. Okay, you think that's mixed up enough?
Looks good.
Okay, so we're just going to pour it back into this skillet. Now, do we need to lower the temperature of the oven now that we're going to be putting this back in there for it to bake?
We're going to put it back in, and we're going to lower the temperature back down to 350 degrees.
Okay.
And we're going to cook it for approximately 30 to 35 minutes until it's golden brown on the top.
Awesome. Okay. I got to make it pretty. I know they don't do that at the fire hall, but I got to make it a little prettier. Okay.
All right.
So since I can't wait 30 to 35 minutes, I'm hoping you're going to tell me you've already made some.
I have. We've got it sitting to our right over here. I'll
Okay.
pick it up. I made it last night. We can cut it up and we can have some with our cabbage stew.
Okay, sounds great. Well, we're going to get us some cabbage stew and we'll be right back and we'll try this cornbread. Thanks so much for being here with us today, and thank you, Kim and Tim, for being with us. We would also like to thank the Discovery Center for letting us borrow their awesome demonstration kitchen. You can find these recipes on our website at www.murfreesborotn.gov/cookingwithmfrd, or you can also find them on YouTube.